And we're going. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our fourth and final ESA Judge course with Erik Krammer of International Surf Services. We are so lucky to have Erik with us this week and last week, talking about all the current judging criteria and in telling us what we need to know. Some of you may be current judges, some of you are district directors, some of you may be future judges, and a lot of you I know are competitors. So all of this information should be benefiting you, and hopefully you can take this back to your local districts and also use it and implement it in the upcoming Southeast, Northeast, and Mid-Atlantic regionals that we're having. So last night he talked about priority, and that was a big one. A lot of people are new to priority. So maybe Erik, if you just want to start with, maybe if anybody has any questions about last night, or if you want to just a quick recap on things like that. And then just give us all the surfing tips you can so we can go out these next couple weekends and get going.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Really happy to be back, for our fourth and final course this evening. And as Michelle said, we're going to been talking about, a lot of the basics that you'll find through competition surfing, whether you are a judge or a competitor or a coach, or just that, like I said, a parent who wants a little bit more education to help out your kids. It goes in all those directions. Last night, as Michelle was saying, we talked about priority, and the key words, the key takeaway words were interpretation of the priority judge, and also evolution of the system, because every year there's more and more changes going on, and it keeps it interesting, it keeps it evolving, it keeps it better for the competitors to produce better surfing. And that's why surfing keeps getting better every year. The level keeps going higher and higher, and I would say the age keeps getting younger and younger, and that's just because of the resources and opportunities that everybody's, the younger kids are getting. And it starts right here. I always say the foundation is knowledge and education. So thanks everybody for joining me to get some more knowledge, a little bit more education. And just to, if anybody has any questions on priority, you can type them into the chat. Sometimes the questions that go in question and answer get slipped by us a little bit, but the chat ones I see coming up in the column all the time. So with priority, just a quick review. It basically starts off in the heat, where everybody, like I said, paddles out before the heat starts. If you get the water start, try to paddle out outside of the contest area so you don't confuse the judges or the priority judge with what's going on in that heat. And then when your heat starts, everybody starts with no priority, so it's normal interference rules apply. And then as somebody catches a wave and they return to what we call the primary takeoff zone, then they begin getting their priority. So if it's a 4-person heat, the first person to surf and return to the takeoff zone, they get 4th priority. And then the next person surfs, return to the takeoff zone, they get 4th, and the other person moves up to 3rd. And now you have, say, 2 people in the lineup. Amongst each other, they have no priority. So they're equal non-priority rules, but they have a higher priority over the people with 3rd and 4th priority. They can paddle for waves. In that non-priority situation, you can paddle for waves and miss them, no problem. I would say you can't lose something you don't have. You don't have priority yet. As soon as that 3rd surfer catches a wave, then the surfer who hasn't caught a wave yet goes to automatic 1st priority. I call it 1st priority by default. And now the priority order has been established. And that pretty much runs through the heat, just on a rotation system. That surfer with 1st priority, now if they paddle and miss, then they go to the end of the line without catching a wave. And it just rotates like that through the rest of the system, through the rest of the heat. There's some other finer details, and that'll be a little bit in the manual that I think everybody will probably get in the next days. Just kind of summarizing all of the documents I've been putting up on the screen. And yeah, so the details there's a lot of them there, but that's just basically how the priority system works. Tonight, we're going to talk about judging and a lot of good judging tips. And then if we have some time in the end, I'll just kind of roughly and quickly review everything with as much time as remaining. One thing I would like to say before going any farther with my judging tips and my judging topics, You know, me and my experience and my knowledge and all the years that I've been judging and directing and doing all that, that goes into this, you know, course that I put out, Getting to the Next Level, presented by me and my business, International Surf Services. But if you are looking to even improve your judging to another higher level, I really, really encourage everybody to take the ISA judging course. It's amazing, not only in the information that it delivers, but also in its video, because there's a lot of interactive exercises. You know, I try to show the videos as much as I could, but they have a complete manual, a workbook, a you know, video that goes along with it, and you're actually watching exchanges, judging heats, getting your comparisons down, seeing interferences. And so you get a lot of the, you know, same information that I've given to you guys over the last 4 courses, but it's really interesting because you get a different level of it, and when you make it interactive, and also it has a really good certification process too. It's really interesting. You know, not especially for judges, but also, like I always say, for the competitors, the coaches, the parents. It's, you know, just another great source and opportunity to get information. What's also cool is that you get, when you finish the course, then you get a level 1 certification. And then as you actually do judging hours, you can bump up to a level 2 for like 20 hours of work, level 3 for a 100 hours of judging work. So there's actually a stepping stone. It's almost like a business plan. So without taking away too much time, you know, I always like to promote that. I actually run that course myself with some other international presenters across the world. And so it's a really, you know, great resource that people have to get into judging and get the details and even get certified. All right, well, let's go ahead and get into my judging tips. I would have the piece of paper right here in front of me. I don't have it written down into a document, but I always, you know, when I present Getting to the Next Level in the classroom, I always read this off when I talk about judging. You know, it's, I say, judging, what is judging when you really look at it? The dictionary has hundreds of variables, but they all focus around someone giving an opinion or decision after careful consideration is taken. Well, that's pretty much surf judging. How does that apply at surfing events? Basically, you have 3, 4, or 5 trained or training experienced surfers or judges watching every wave and analyzing every maneuver and then giving their opinion with a set of 100 numbers. You say 100 numbers. No, it's 10 numbers. Well, we use the 10th system, so you actually get the opportunity to use 100 different numbers. Does that sound easy? Some people are like, yeah, it's just surf judging. You're just watching waves and stuff, right? Well, maybe it's easy to keep scale, to do well for a few heats, but try it for 8 to 10 hours in a day. After a long day in the glare, in the cold, in the wind, there's, you know, a lot of dynamics that go on, and a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I judge that heat so well. Yeah, but can you judge an entire day well? It's complicated. It's definitely, you know, it's a job that requires commitment, dedication, and a lot of passion for this sport, of course. So if you're thinking maybe it's not so easy, how many rides actually get scored in an event? And how many maneuvers are completed on each of those rides? The number of rides is usually in the thousands at the end of a surfing event that goes over a few days. And the number of maneuvers, astronomical. The judges are analyzing every single one of those maneuvers. So do you think there might be room for a difference of opinion? Of course there is. You can set down the best 5 judges in the world and they won't agree on everything. They'll be pretty close as far as defining what good surfing is because they're the best judges in the world, but they're always going to have a difference of opinion. And that's, you know, what I encourage the world that loves surfing to really understand, that we all have a different opinion on something. So do you think there might be a difference of opinion between the competitors and the judges, the coaches and the judges, the public and the judges, and sometimes the judges themselves? And then I have here at the end, maybe think about it in a little bit more detail the next time you question a score or have a difference of opinion on a score. We're all humans. We all, you know, somebody likes this a little more or that a little bit more. So you're going to have it. I sometimes, you know, hear coaches and stuff coming up to me as the technical director. They're like, oh my gosh, did you see the last spread in that score? There was like a 2-point spread in that. I'm like, 2 points? It doesn't sound very big to me. I'm like, those are the judges' scores. Do you want the judges' score, or do you want just one person giving you the score so it's all close? So that's just, a little bit of my breakdown on judging. That, it is an extremely complicated thing to do, but it's not, if you know the rules and you're able to focus and concentrate, it's actually very rewarding to do, because you get to work in something that you love, and it's your passion. And usually that drives you to, for one, not feeling like it's really work because it's something you are involved with. But it's also really rewarding too. So it's got its positives and negatives, but it's a good thing. So let's see, I got a quick question coming in here. Statistically, if you go from 3 to 5 judges, that removes some of the variability. Any thoughts on that? I know it would cost more. I like the 5-man panels. But usually when you're going to use 5 judges in a scoring system, you need to have 7 judges, because you need to give those judges some breaks on time. I encourage a quality panel. It just depends on the quality of your judges. If you're going to go, from a 3-person panel to a 5-person panel, but you're not going to get quality judges, you're almost making it more difficult. I would rather have 3 really well-trained judges rather than, 3 good judges, rather than, 2 good judges and 3 average ones. It gets a little bit easier to manage, and, like I would say, and everything else, quality versus quantity. But it is nice when you have a 5-person panel, because you can throw out a high score and you can throw out a low score, and then you have those middle results. If it's tabulation or if it's computer scoring, the high and the low get tossed out. So it definitely, it improves it. I like the bigger system, but at the same time, you need to focus on the quality. So that's, kind of where I sit on that. Let me go ahead and pull up my first screen to share. Tonight, the material that I was revising it and kind of going over it, it's a little bit dry. I don't have, tons of photos or video of the judges judging, but I have a really good set of information for, you people that want to understand the details of judging and what it takes. So here is my first screen that I'm going to pull up. Let me make sure that screen got shared. Hold on one second. Stop share. I don't know what happened there. Give me another chance. Here we go. All right. So basically, here's, this is going to be in the manual you guys are going to get back, get at the end. These are my tips for good judging. And what you really want to start with is analyzing what your scale is, what your scoring categories are. Good judges, they will scale the heat based on the conditions available and the potential ability of the competitors. So, I can't stress that enough. It's what the potential of, one division versus another division is completely different. Everybody knows that, the U18 boys is going to surf a lot better than, the 11 under push and goes. It's just the technique is different and everything. So if you're judging one like the other, it's not, you're comparing apples to oranges. So, you need to analyze what is the potential ability of these competitors. So, not exactly what they're going to do, but you have an idea of what they have a possibility to do. And then you really need to look at the conditions that are possible. Is it just, 4 to 6 foot and perfect offshore barrels? Or is it 1 to 2 foot and crumbly onshore waves? So that's going to dictate, what an excellent score is that day, what a poor score is. So you really need to analyze the conditions available and the potential of your competitors. And that's really where you start. And in reality, that should kind of start at the beginning of the day, when you first get there, before you even started judging, seeing what kind of conditions you have. If there's anybody in the water, kind of seeing how they're surfing. And then as well, like, I always say, like within WSL, there's only 2 divisions. There's men's and there's women's. but you go to an ESA event, you go to a WSA event on the West Coast, and there's so many divisions that they're jumping in and out of, and you can't judge every division the same. You can judge all the heats within that division relatively the same, but when you skip to a different division, you need to know it, because sometimes you get into that first heat of the next division, and if you didn't know it's a new division, you're going to maybe scale it wrong. So like for us, on the West Coast, we usually set this day schedule that has all the divisions right there on the judging tower, with the head judge, or right in the middle of the judges if they're all sitting at the same table, so that you know exactly what time there was a change and you can acknowledge it. Now, based on these considerations I talked about, which was conditions available and ability of the competitors, you want to categorize your rides from poor to excellent and give the corresponding score. This is super important, this category area, and this really helps the best judges in the world all the way down to very beginning judges, because everybody can usually look at a ride and go, oh, well, for the conditions out there and for the potential of these competitors, this is an average ride. And so if you're thinking average, well, you're already able to put it into a range of 2 points. So you've already got a pretty good, accurate, pretty good score if you're, in the right category. But like I said, it really depends on conditions available and the ability of the competitors. So basically the poor ride would be that lower end of the scale, the 0, although you can't really throw a 0-point ride anymore. Kind of talked yesterday about it, and you used to in the past, but now it's basically 0.1 to 1.9. And so that would be considered a poor ride. Usually it's a maneuver that is, it depends with the ability that you're scoring, but usually it's something that doesn't have any maneuvers. Usually it's a quick in and out or a wipeout. That's kind of where it goes in the poor ride range. But if you're at a really high level, a poor ride could be just a not very good maneuver. Fair ride, that would be the 2 to 3.9 range. The average ride, right there in the middle of the scale, 4 to 5.9. The good ride, 6 to 7.9, and excellent ride, 8 to 10 points. Sometimes the head judge might give you little cues here and there without, telling you his opinion or what score to write. Sometimes you might hear like, well, yeah, I think that was a good ride. Well, if somebody thinks it's a good ride, then whatever they're thinking, the minimum it can probably be is a 6. And, it's probably goes as high as a 7.9. They're somewhere in that range. So basically, you have these different categories. I can't stress enough, no matter what level judge you're on, start with your categories. Kind of what you're going to do is you're going to be like, okay, that ride there, oh, that was a good ride. So you're thinking, oh, good ride, I'm going to go in the 6 to 7.9 range. I'm going to go with a 6.5. And I'll talk about it later, but always good to start off with your wholes and your half numbers before you break down into decimals. So yeah, that was a good ride, 6.5. And then you see another one come in and you're like, oh, that wasn't very good. I'm going to go fair on that wave. So you go 3.0. And then another wave comes in. You're like, oh, that was another good ride. Well, let me see. I've already got one wave in the good category, which is a 6.5. Is this better or worse than that 6.5? And not just better or worse, but how much better or worse? Am I all the way up to a 7.5, or am I under at a 6? And so that's, kind of, I would say it's almost like a jigsaw puzzle. It's like, you have a wave here and you drop it, and then the next wave comes and you're like, oh, it's a lot worse. And it goes down here, and the next one comes here, and the next one goes there. And it's like, you're putting this puzzle together, which is a heat, and you're putting the puzzle together with your opinion of 100 numbers. And, that's kind of another definition of judging. So it's like, I can't stress enough, come back to your categories, especially if somewhere along the line, you lose scale with the rest of the judges, or you just lose focus or whatever. Come back to your categories. Start the day with your categories. Start that division with the categories. Next one on here would be letter D. It's often good to open the scale to make a distinct separation between the categories of the rides. This will then reflect the competitor's performance based on conditions available and their potential ability. So, the bold words are there is open the scale to make a distinct separation. Make it easier on yourself. Like I said, it's not just better or worse, but how much better or worse? Is it 4 points better? Is it half a point better? Is it 8 points better? And so the more you're able to open the scale, the more you're going to make it easier on yourself. Sometimes, the judges, it depends on the conditions, but sometimes you'll go through the whole day and you'll be like, oh my gosh, there was one 8-point ride all day long. We didn't even use 20% of the scale. And so that's the judges not analyzing, uh, you know, for one thing, you can say, oh, the competitors didn't surf well, or the conditions weren't good. Well, but then that's also a reflection of the judges not analyzing the level of the competitors or the conditions out there. I mean, you could watch all the rides one day and those be like, oh, all those rides were horrible, conditions were horrible, but you have to separate and open the scale on something. And the more you can open it on the good and the excellent and get it farther away from the poor and the fair, then you're just going to make it that much more easier on yourself. Um, for me, I try to, open the scale as much as I can. A lot of times, especially I see it in beach break conditions around the world, even with the best judges, I see it. And it happens in beach breaks and it's the average range, the average ride. And I would say sometimes it's so easy to get a 4-point ride and it's so hard to get a 6. And basically they're nearly in the same category. And somebody just goes down the line and does, 3 or 4 not very good fair turns, and they get a 4, a 4, 5, almost because of quantity, which quantity shouldn't really come into it. You're looking at the quality. But 4s and 4 5s go out the door, as we say, really easy. But sometimes it's really hard to get a 6. A person has to do 2 really good turns. But maybe those 2 good turns, if you're going to go 4, 4, 5 on, multiple fair turns, well, those 2 good turns, maybe it's not just a good ride, maybe it's an excellent ride. So I always say, my mentor, Midget Smith, always said, keep the really bad surfing down and really lift the good surfing up. And guess what? You create so much more space for your down the middle. And then you can put everything in place. It makes it really easy. A trick that I use, to open the scale, especially on the excellent category, I always like to share this with people is, and, I learned it the hard way, probably on my first year on tour, but I learned a trick to make myself go higher into the excellent range. And I'll see a ride and I'll be like, okay, that was an excellent ride, 8 points. But then like instantly my brain, I don't even think about it anymore. My brain goes, well, if I go 8 points, that's the bottom of the excellent range. Could something else come later on in the heat and it's worse than this wave, but I still call it excellent? Because if there is, I don't have any more room for it. If I'm thinking, yeah, there's something else in this heat that can be excellent and it's worse than this wave, well, guess what? I'm going to go 8.5. I'm going to go 9 because when that wave comes later, I'm going to have room for it and I'm still going to call it excellent surfing. The tour manager of the WSL these days, Renato Hickel, when I first started, he was just coming off of being a head judge and, he hammered me at one contest about like, oh, you only went 8 on that score and now this other wave and you thought it was worse and now you're going 7.5, it's not even an excellent score anymore. So I figured out my own way to try to open up the scale. So just, sharing with you guys some of my tricks. So that's about opening up the scale. Like I said, it's going to make it really easy on yourself. The next part would be the scale and the point system itself. Obviously, it's a 10-point system, but you can, go back through the history of the judging criteria. And there was times where they used, a 0 to 20-point scale. And, it's evolved through the years, but at the moment and for quite some time, it's been a 10-point scale. And we get to use the tenths of a point, which basically gives us 100 numbers. Now, if you're trying to use all those 100 numbers, can kind of, especially if you're a beginning judge, it can kind of become confusing on yourself. So a lot of times I say, just focus on the basic scale. Start with the first scale. Just start a heat, especially start the heat with the holes and the halves. Try not to think too much. Just number 1, boom, focus on the category. Then you get within a 2-point range and start dropping in the beginning, the holes and the halves. And those will give you, good separate comparisons. If it's, I've heard Some other judges, I've never done it myself, but some judges I've seen have not so good judges on the panel, and they're like, the person could not separate. They were giving me a 4-point ride on every heat. And they're like, I'm like, what did you do? They're like, well, I gave that person 4 scores that they could use. They could use a 2, a 4, a 6, and an 8. I gave them 4 scores and said, those are the only scores you can use. And if you focus on those, you're going to be a lot closer than getting caught up in all these decimals. But that's a, very beginning entry level judge that was struggling and just finding tricks and resources to help them, move forward. But most people are able to get it quick enough that, like I say, they can use those holes in the halves. They can use, let's say 20 of those numbers. And that's where you should start with. Now, once you get farther into the heat, that's when you can jump to your second scale. So say you have a 6-point ride, good score. And you have a 6.5 ride, another good score. And then you have something that you're like, well, it's not better than the 6.5. It's worse than the 6.5, but it is better than the 6.0. So now you're thinking, well, it's right between the 6.0 and 6.5 I have. Well, let's start in the middle as much as we can. So that's why you would use the second scale. So you can't go 6.25, which would be, right in the middle, because we can only use tenths, not hundreds. So you're going to have to commit to one score or the other. You're either going to be a 6.2 or you're going to be a 6.3. Doesn't really matter which one you start with. Some people might favor one or the other, but for me, there's no difference. And then that's, in that 6 to 6.5, but say there's a 6.5 and a 7, then you're going to focus on those other decimals, the 0.7 and the 0.8, because you're not going to go the 0.75. So that would be your second scale. So you're using something in that range. Now, some people really like to get detailed, and that would be when you jump to the third scale. And those would be the 0.1, the 0.4, the 0.6, and the 0.9s. But you really don't want to jump into that third scale until you've started with your holes and halves, you've used your secondary scale, and now, you've got a 6.2 and you've got a 6.0, and you're like, yeah, I like this one better than this one, but worse than that one. The only score I've got is a 6.1 left. So you're going to go right in the middle. Sometimes the judges might be the other side of what you're thinking. And it's just, as long as you're analyzing and comparing and you've got ways you can remember and compare them to it, doesn't really matter which side of it you go, just as long as you're, fairly close and you're defining what good surfing is. But like I say, focus on the holes in the halves, focus on the second scale, focus on the third scale. There's some judges as well. And they've been judging for a long time and they've just got bad habits. I'll see, I've got one judge that he judges pretty good, but he starts off with the third scale. And then somewhere in the middle of the heat goes the second scale, and it's like he ends the heat with the basic scale, the first scale. And every time I'm watching, I'm just going, no, but his scores are all really close. So it's kind of hard to argue with because the scores are good, but I can't stress enough, if you don't want to confuse yourself, start with start in that order. Another thing, a really good thing to remember, and this is just for professionalism, complete your written scores. Don't leave them open. And I have their 7.0 versus a 7. And, you might think, well, what's the difference between a 7.0 and a 7? It's not so much the difference in the score, especially if you're typing in the computer, there's no difference. But when it's on a paper sheet, you don't want, who knows what may happen. But if you leave a 7 open, somebody might come along with a pen and write down 7.5 and then be like, hey, tabulator, you didn't add in this extra 0.5. So close those doors, close those scores, leave no room for, what might happen when that sheet leaves the tower. So, if it's, like I said, use the number, the decimal. I always use like a big number and a little number, but make sure you get 2 numbers on there, unless it's a 10, and then you're going to use 3 numbers to separate from the 1.0 and the 10. Let's see, had a comment coming in. Opening of the scale in our pushing division is challenging. I know from early in the course, you said to judge the surfing and not so much for distance board choice. I found out more often you have to find edges to separate. Yeah, I mean, that's a great comment from one of our participants there. And like I said, not that judging on the upper level is easy because there's so many details that the dynamic is challenging, but there's things that you can separate on. A lot of times in those, push in divisions, there's not a lot of maneuvers going down. If there is, whoa, you have something to separate. But a lot of times they're just going straight in the whitewater. And maybe you get somebody steering to one side, or maybe you get somebody like switch footing back and forth, or things like that. And those are the most challenging heats to judge, is when nobody's doing nothing. I almost call it like creative judging 101. You have to find something in the criteria and that ride that you can say, oh, that was more difficult than the other. Distances hasn't been in the criteria since 1998, but I will say riding farther on a whitewater wave is more difficult than riding shorter on a whitewater wave. So distance can come into it, but of course, if somebody's on a face wave versus a whitewater wave, just those basic fundamentals. But it's challenging, those entry level beginning contests, and you're pulling your hair out. You just want to go 1.0, 1.0, 1.0, but you have to give a result. You have to give your opinion. That's what you're there for. So you have to find things that are indirectly related in the judging criteria that you wouldn't normally use in a high performance heat. And that's challenging. But great question there.
Can I just add something real quick?
Yeah.
He mentioned our push-in division, and I just want it to be clear across the board for all of our district directors that the push-in division and all of our judges is not necessarily meant to be a judged division, whereas it's more of an expression session for the little guys who obviously can't catch waves on their own to go out and get pushed into a wave. So I know some districts have been scoring this and having the judge try to score those heats. But in all honesty, the push-in division is basically just supposed to be for fun. And honestly, it's a great time to put that in the middle of the day when the tide's low and the judges need a break or something like that. So, or it's a great time to pull up maybe some of your younger judges and kind of let them practice. But, when you have a 5-year-old out there being pushed into a whitewater wave, there's really not much you can judge. So I just wanted to add that.
Cool. Thanks, Michelle. Well, that helps. But eventually all those push-in divisions as well are going to advance on to the next division. And, that's when probably the maneuvers and things are going to become that's much more defined. And the more professionalism and the more, accurate judging they get back, even at that entry level, then the more they're able to understand the system and quickly move through it. So, but like I said, definitely the entry level events whether it's push-in or just, the level that's at the lowest, it's challenging. So next one would be number 3 on here, and that would be good judging is making good comparisons by properly evaluating and separating one from another. I can't stress enough, comparing every wave, evaluating every wave, and separating every wave, separating into those categories, evaluating the quality of the maneuver, and of course, comparing everything in the heat to itself. I have written here, one ride is always better or worse than the previous. We're talking about, unless you're in a wave pool, every single wave is different. So every single ride is different. So if you just say every wave is the same, yeah, maybe they're in the same category, but the waves aren't the same. You're there as a judge to give your opinion. So whether, everybody went the other way, but you went this way, it doesn't really matter. It's, you don't have to be in agreement, but you are there to give your opinion. And if you're giving the same score, well, you're not really judging. You're just taking note of the wave. So I would say, one ride is always better. Try to make your separations, even if it's in the smallest increments. Like it says there, I've already mentioned it, not just better or worse, but how much better or worse. No 2 rides are identical, so try to reduce the amount of identical scores. Too many identical scores shows poor comparisons and or poor memory. Not to say that anybody has a bad memory that's, giving their best effort, but obviously some judges have amazing recall and others don't have as much recall. And if you're dropping the same score every time, then there's not a lot of thinking going on. You're not comparing well because none of those rides are the same. I mean, for me, I go through my, basic scale to my secondary scale to my third scale, and I'm comparing everything in that heat and everything to the previous heat. And, it's it's very easy sometimes to just throw down, oh, the guy had a wipeout, it's a 1.0 or a 1.5. But me, I'll start just, it's the way my brain works. I can't reprocess it, but it's like I'll be analyzing the criticalness of that incomplete maneuver. Was it a really big incomplete maneuver? That might go to the top of my internal incomplete maneuver scale. And is it just a fall off? That's going to go at the bottom. And you might say, well, that doesn't even matter in the heat. Well, a lot of times it doesn't, but it shows that I'm comparing everything. But guess what? In some conditions, it does. It might just be complete closeouts. And a lot of times people won't even get two good waves. And it comes down to whether the person had a 1.5 or a 2-point ride. It comes down to a really low soaring second wave. So the best judges are going to analyze everything. And if you're throwing, like I said, too many of the same scores, then you're just not comparing everything. Let's see, moving on there. So talked about memory just a minute ago. So it's, memory of the rides in a heat is crucial to making good comparisons. If you don't have a good memory, you can still be a good judge, but the better your memory is, the better your recall is, probably the better judge that you're going to be. But, as a rookie judge or somebody who's been doing it for a while, you can't expect them to remember every single ride in the heat. But there are some very key and significant rides that will help you keep scale in a heat. And if you compare them all to those waves you can remember, which I'll just go ahead and read it. If all the rides in a heat cannot be remembered, then a minimum of 3 or 4 key waves must be remembered to keep the same scale and make consistent comparisons through the same heat. It is best to use the most important one, the first significant ride of the heat, to remember where the scale started. And I'm not talking about somebody just dropped in and kicked out, had a 0.5-point ride or a 1-point ride. Those are really, you can't really scale a heat off of that. But the first significant ride, meaning something that somebody's probably going to keep in their score line. It can be a 3, a 4, a 5, however high, the wave goes. But that is where the scale started in the heat. Now it's really important, if everybody, especially if it's computer scoring, if it's, manual tabulation, not quite as important, but for computer scoring, it's really important everybody starts the heat. I call it like on the same line. That's, a time the head judge can step in and be like, oh, I've got a 3-point ride on this opener to a 9-point ride. Wow, that's a massive, massive spread. But the average in the middle, it's a 6.5. I've got, a 6, a 6.5, and a 7 right down the middle. So the average on this one, guys, is 6.5. So the 9 should probably, come down closer to that 7. Maybe don't jump the other side because you're going to change the average, but let's keep the average at the 6.5. The 9 maybe come down to a 7 or a 7.5, and that 3 come up to a 5.5 or a 6. Let's close off this gap so we're all starting on the same line. Because what happens if you start with a 3 and a 9 in the beginning of the heat? Yeah, you guessed it, chaos. And everybody's going in a different range because they're all comparing to a different score that they had on that first significant ride. So you might be remembering it, but you're remembering it to your score as a 3, and somebody else is remembering on their first ride to a 9. And then everybody starts steering off in different places. So especially if it's, like I said, computer scoring, you want to try to start everybody on the same line. It's not, you don't need to mess with the average too much unless you're like, oh, well, the last wave of the last heat was better than this one. How can you go better on this wave than the previous heat? Head judge has that moment to really step in and organize that opening exchange. And that's super important. So, and I'll reiterate that a little down the line. Right now, we're mostly talking about those key waves. So first significant ride of the heat. You need to always remember that one. The next one would be the best ride of the heat, to remember how high the scale goes. So if your best wave in the heat is only a 5, you need to remember what that 5 is. So everything that's worse, you know how high you can go. And if anything comes that's better, you know it's going to be above that. And then you need to decide by how much. So best ride of the heat needs to be remembered. The last ride that you scored, to know where the scale is at exactly now, should be in the same place. But I would say first ride, best ride, and the last ride you scored. And then there's also, you know, within the ISA judging course, they also say the highest scored wave of the day in that division. So that kind of helps you not only keep scale in that heat, but it also helps you keep that heat in comparison to the other heats. So, you know, you want to be able to remember those rides, super important. It's also nice if you can remember a competitor's best ride. That's another area, you know, those 4 ones are almost mandatory. But if you can remember a competitor's best wave, then you have something within their score line to compare to, because, you know, me as a competitor, or, you know, you at home as a competitor, when you get out of a heat, you usually know what your best wave was. And it's nice if the judges' scores reflect what you thought your best wave was. I mean, some athletes, you know, aren't very good judges, or they don't kind of understand a few things. So there's room for difference of opinion there for sure, like I talked about. But normally, you know, it should be reflective. If you have, you know, all the scores are the same, then they're like, well, wow, all my waves were the same. And if you have one wave that was totally, you know, different, it's just nice to reflect that. And I talked about comparing one heat to the next. You know, the last wave in the previous heat should kind of be compared to the start of the next heat, because I always throw out this, you know, scenario. What if you have a surfer and he's in the current heat, and it's, you know, down to the wire, the buzzer beater, and he needs a 5.5 to get through the heat. He surfs the wave good, he gets a 5.0. He doesn't get the score, he doesn't advance. He's walking back up the beach, and the next heat, which is the same division, a person takes off, and on their very opening wave, they surf the wave and they surf it worse than he did, and they get a 6.0. Person's like, that person, they just got a 6.0 and they surfed worse than I did, and I surfed better and I only got a 5. So there's no comparison there. Main focus, I can't stress enough, needs to be within the heat, but secondary focus would be the heats comparing to each other. So let's just, you know, more detail. Yeah, so pretty much what I just said is letter B there. It's best to use your memory of prior rides in the day to keep the same general scale from one heat to the next, as long as conditions or division / ability of the competitors has not changed. You know, so that's pretty much what I talked about. If the conditions change, or the ability of the surfers for some reason, usually they're getting better through the event. But usually as conditions change, you can start to adapt your scale. Sometimes the scale starts to move slowly, or sometimes the head judge needs to step in and say, hey guys, like, we're struggling to get waves out of above a 5. Like, look how bad it got out there. Maybe we should try to open up the scale, because we're really just using half the scale. So just kind of, you know, being aware of adaptations like that. Super important. Let's see, where are we at? Super important. I can't stress this letter C enough. Don't change the scale in the middle of the heat, as it may lead to a close heat, which didn't need to be close, or it may lead to a wrong result. You know, where the heat starts at is where the heat needs to finish at with the scale. If you start a heat too low in the scale, then you have to end the heat too low in the scale. Your comparisons, they're going to be tight, they're going to be compressed, but you need to maintain the scale to have the right result in the end. The heat might be closer than it should have been, but you need to do your best to try to keep it accurate. If you start a heat too high in the scale, well, there's room then to work moving forward, so it can be beneficial to start too high. But then you also need to be really careful that you remember the opening ride and the best ride of the heat to see how far you need to separate them. Because if you start off, you know, with a wave that was, you scored 8 points and it was just an average wave, well, when you get something in the excellent range, you could be forcing yourself easily into a 9-point, 10-point ride. I talked about, since I just mentioned, 10-point ride there. When I dropped those categories earlier with a poor, fair, average, good, excellent, the 10-point ride, that would be considered perfect for the conditions and for the level of the competitors. Or a 10-point ride can be also so much better than other excellent rides that you scored that the scale almost pushes you into a 10-point ride. You're like, well, that wasn't necessarily perfect, but it was so much better than the 9 that I was forced into a 10. And then there's also the dilemma of, did I go 10 too early in the heat? Now I don't have any more room. Well, if it's that good, go 10. If you have another wave that comes in, guess what? You go 10 again. It's unfortunate. That's, a flaw in our system. Once you go 10, there's no more room to go. I can remember a few events where it cost some results, but usually it doesn't really come down to that. And if you see those contests, I remember them always talking about, Shane Beshin back when it was top 3 waves and he had a perfect 30-point heat at Kira. And it was like, well, they didn't use the scale right. But the first barrel was so much better than everything in the day that they went 10. And guess what? The next barrel was better. And the one after that was even better. So sometimes you don't, know what's expected to come, but don't be afraid to go 10. If it's that good, we always say, like, you'll have a feeling usually on those 10-point rides. It's usually get like goosebumps, or we call it like chicken skin. Sorry if you're a vegetarian. But you just get that kind of fuzzy feeling where like, whoa, that was something, amazing. But like I said, it could be in the younger division that only surf at an intermediate level, and it's so much better than everything else. So that's just a few, pointers on those 10-point rides, which are great to see. And of course, there's something super special. Letter D, I pretty much already talked about earlier on, and it's about, starting the heat with a significant score that aligns with the other judges, and remember it. The head judge may adjust this score to have the judges start from the same area or category of the scale to give a scaling tool useful for the remainder of that heat. So that's, like I said, in the beginning of the heat, even if it's manual tabulation or especially computer scoring, it's good to have everybody start on the same category, or within that 1 to 2 point range, so that as the heats go along, everybody's at least has a chance, to be in the same area. The head judge, he's there to keep you organized, but I can remember one event, WCT, I judged in France, and my head judge for most of the 11 years that I was on there was Perry Hatchett, and he was, an amazing judge. But he had Western Australia, he had a very hard temper, and kind of ruled the judging tower with the iron fist, so to speak. Things have kind of evolved and excuse me, moved in different directions, but he would get, I remember in an event in France, it was the finals of a WCT, and he basically set us on the same scale. And then he said, all right, guys, you think you know what you're doing? You're on your own. The average of the first wave is a 7-point ride. You guys can get the rest on your own. You should be able to do it here. You're the best judges in the world. And we all just kind of dropped and was like, oh my God, are you really going to do this to us in the middle of a final? And he actually left the tower for about half the heat, and then he came back halfway through and helped us through the rest of it. But that was just tough learning experiences at the top level. But that's just same kind of point to get across, though. You need to start with the same scale. Need to start with that same wave. Otherwise, everybody kind of can go off in different directions. Luckily, that example I gave you doesn't really happen too much anymore these days. The head judges have kind of transitioned through the years. And I'll talk about the ESA system in just a few minutes as well, and what we've done to, really make an adaptation into Olympics. And for me, that's, the future of the sport. Excuse me. The judging criteria rewards critical surfing. Obviously, we talked about judging criteria, and I would say that it's so important to understand the details of the judging criteria. It is, I always try not to talk religion or talk politics, especially when I'm on a online judging course. But I always say the judging criteria is the Bible or the backbone of surfing competition. So the more you understand the judging criteria, you understand what everything's about. And it's about critical surfing. It's about good surfing. So critical surfing reflects difficult maneuvers, degree of difficulty, but it also reflects difficult rides. So if you have a heat with a low ability, I know we were, taking, for an example, the push-in divisions, although, Michelle said those aren't mandatorily judged, but obviously those would be the heats with the low ability. So you're not so much going to be analyzing the difficult maneuvers. Of course, if somebody does a difficult maneuver, you're going to score it very, very well. But sometimes, a big wave, a late drop, a heavy section, or even just an incomplete maneuver versus no maneuver at all, those are the items that you need to look at to really analyze what was a difficult ride. And so those difficult rides can be rewarded even without completed maneuvers, especially if no one's completing anything. And that goes, in shortboarding, longboarding, pretty much all the disciplines. But of course, then when you start comparing turns, it's the quality of maneuvers should always outscore the quantity of maneuvers. And I can't stress that enough. Like I said, a lot of times, with inexperienced judges, a whole bunch of turns gets a big score. And sometimes just one big score doesn't quite get rewarded for the difficulty that it was done with. And so, here's a few examples of things that, when you're really trying to focus on the quality, think about it like one excellent maneuver should always be scored higher than multiple poor, fair, or average maneuvers. Poor maneuvers on a wave should get something in the poor category, and fair maneuvers should get something in the fair category. Average maneuvers, if they're all average, well, that 4 to 5.9 range. And even if it's just one excellent maneuver, one excellent maneuver might go in the excellent range. It might go in the good range. It really depends on what's possible that day. But if you're comparing, those combinations of bad turns to one excellent turn, you got to go with the excellent turn every time. But when you start adding in combinations of maneuvers, that's when it gets a little bit more complex. You might have somebody that, like I was saying the other day, had a couple average turns and a good turn in the middle. And how does that compare to somebody that, had a fair turn and an average turn and a good turn, or somebody that just had two good turns, or one person that had one excellent maneuver? So it's complicated, and, that's when the opinions really start to differ. So I always tell people, imagine yourself surfing. Usually if you're a judge, you're a surfer. There are some judges out there that actually do a really good job at judging that don't actually surf. Pretty rare, but I have come into it. I don't encourage it. I like to have people that, feel it from the heart. They have that passion. It just drives the feeling into their scoring a little bit better. And if you're a past competitor, then you even have that other side of it. But it's not always to say as well that ex-competitors are going to be great judges. Sometimes they are, and sometimes they aren't. A lot of times they have difficulty to focus on scoring other people's rides all day long. They want to get out there and go surfing themselves. But some of them, have that inside knowledge. And so it's great credibility for the panel when you have that type of judge on there. But at the very same time, they need to do a good job to back it up. So I would say, imagine yourself surfing. Would you want to do one big, great maneuver or lots of little turns to the beach? Most people would say, well, I want to do one big maneuver. And then, decide what is more difficult, when you're looking at those combinations and those big one maneuvers, and then just let your scores reflect it. Like I said, you got 100 scores there. And so you just need to let those scores reflect what your feeling is, and don't think about it too much. Usually that first score that comes to your mind is usually pretty accurate. Sometimes when you start thinking a little bit too much, you have more of a possibility to steer yourself in the wrong direction. Let's see, rides should be scored and compared based on how the wave is actually surfed and not on the quality of the wave itself. For example, good scores can be gotten on poor waves, and poor scores can also be gotten on good waves. So I see this area problematic a lot of times, and people, even with, good judges, sometimes I see two sides of it. Like a lot of times somebody who doesn't do um, very good surfing, but they catch a really good wave. Sometimes I think those, more entry level judges have a tendency to overscore that wave because they have that feeling of, wow, that was a great wave, but maybe it wasn't great surfing. And so you really need to focus on the surfing. And then there's sometimes the other side of it at the upper end. I see sometimes, somebody catch a really good wave and they don't, and this is usually happens more on the upper level judging, I think, especially when the level of competitors high. Somebody catches a really good wave and they don't surf it they surf it kind of average, but because you caught an excellent wave and surfed it average, sometimes I see that score get held down even more. It's like, wow, that guy really blew that wave. He's going to get a fair score when maybe the surfing was just average. So I would say, like, focus on the quality of maneuvers, focus on, you know, the maneuvers and not the wave itself. Now, there's the other side of it. You can take off on a really bad wave. Usually if you take off on a bad wave, it's hard to surf it good. Some people do. Um, you know, just when I see the East Coasters come to the West Coast and it's really bad conditions, it's amazing how great, I see the East Coasters come and there's some conditions the West Coasters can't even deal with. And the East Coasters are out there just gaining speed, doing tons of maneuvers. It's exciting to watch. And I'm like, wow, the waves are really bad and they're surfing them so good. And obviously, I know the East Coast has amazing conditions and other times, a lot of the times, not so great conditions. It's kind of hit or miss. And so if you're catching poor waves, but the surfing is still really good on it, you need to be able to analyze the surfing. And, obviously, if you're catching good waves and doing good surfing, you should get good scores. But if you're catching bad waves and doing good surfing, you can get a good score too. But the good score surfing on good waves should be scored higher. So, that's just that comparison. So the wave quality isn't so much what you're scoring, but it can give an indirect application to, the maneuvers that are being done. But can't stress enough, focus on quality of maneuvers, not so much on quality of wave. Let's see here. The other area, score the colors. Don't get lost on the names. Super important. Sometimes people are like, oh my God, look who's in this next heat. It's, Johnny who's leading the season and Billy who, just got sponsored by so-and-so and this kid who's traveling from, whatever. Don't worry about who's much in the heat. Score red, white, yellow, blue. And if it's a 6-man heat, you got green and orange. Those are colors. They're not names. They're not people. You're scoring the colors. And so it's super important so that you don't get influenced by, anything outside going. You're going to want to score the surfing. So if you're focused on colors, not names, not people's faces, it's going to just help you to do your most respectful job. Where are we at on here? So good judging qualities I talked a little bit about earlier. It's definitely good to have confidence as a quality. You want to have confidence in your understanding of the rules. I can't stress enough the importance of understanding all the details of the judging criteria, all the details of calling interferences. That checklist that I was talking about the other day just gives you ultra confidence to when you see something going down, you need to decide what you saw and which rule applies to it. You need to have confidence in, knowing what a quality maneuver is and confidence in yourself to be able to, under the pressure, throw the right scores at the right time. And that, it comes, some people have a lot of confidence right from the start, and other people's it just takes, experience, which is down the line, to build their confidence. Concentration, can't stress concentration enough. You need to be focused, on the water. You need to be focused on the rides. You can't be looking up the beach. You can't be looking at your friends over there. Can't be talking too much, in the judge that's next to you. Normally at the bigger events, they try to, have dividers so that, somebody can't be looking over at somebody else's sheets or having too much of a conversation. So you want your concentration on the water. The cell phones, the, technological things that offer lack of concentration, those, you got to do your best to turn your phone off, put it in your pocket. While you're judging, you should be judging. While you're on your breaks, that's what your breaks for. If you're on the phone and you're sending text messages, there's definitely no concentration there. There's multitasking going on, and sometimes multitasking works, sometimes it doesn't. But if you want to give your ultimate professionalism of the event, then you need to be 100% concentrated. What was the other one? Next one would have been experience. Experience, like I said, that comes with, time on the panel. When you're a rookie judge, entry level judge, you're not going to have much experience. The only way to get experience is to keep coming back and keep coming back. And maybe you've dropped a bad score here and, talk to an experienced judge, find out why they had a different opinion than you, or maybe watch a replay on it, or, try to figure out what you didn't agree with. So when you come back the next time, or you judge the next heat, because you analyze that on break, you're going to be able to improve yourself. That's going to help your experience build quicker. And as well, usually the head judge is the most experienced person on the panel, or they have, the best skills to perform that position, because some people are amazing judges, but they just don't have the people skills to be able to, manage the panel and stuff. So in general, though, head judge is the most experienced panel, or if there is no head judge, then, you as an entry level judge need to look to that most experienced panel to get his experience and, soak up some of that information. Some of the information that you're getting from me in the course today. So experience would be, super vital. And then the last one on the list, recall. And recall would be, part of that memory that we're talking about, that memory to go back and remember where the scale started off with that first significant ride, and be able to recall the best wave of the heat and the last wave you scored and the previous heat and the surfer's best rides. It's like I said, some people have absolutely amazing recall. They can remember this wave and that wave. And so everything is just comparing to itself and the other heat and the past heat. And the best judges remember waves from years, maybe not every wave in the contest, but they'll remember the important ones years down the line, the ones that, maybe made a difference or made them think, or, God forbid, like there's a wrong result or something. Usually you, as a judge or a head judge, you hold on to those ones forever because you want your best, you want the right results. But the recall is super important to remember to keep yourself in line and scale. But like I said, where was I on this? Yeah, the key points for remember, there's a lot of good stuff in there. I'll just take a little short break from going down that list, because the next, key points, there's a lot of good information in there that I'm going to start to dissect. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, I know every organization is different, and I haven't been into any of the ESA district events, but I've, been to the Easterns, and I've seen a lot of events go down in my time. So I know that every organization works at a different level. And sometimes it's, like I said, just the judges getting out there, doing their best. They watch it once, they write down the score, manual tabulation. Every contest has its, ability to function. Obviously, I've worked from the very bottom all the way to the top, and sometimes that happens still in the same month, or one week after another. Because, like I said, I'm a technical director of the ESA and of the Olympics, and I still judge at my mom's events. She runs the Scholastic Surf Series, which you have very entry level surfing in those events. So at all levels, from the bottom to the top and everything in between. But within the ESA, we've been striving especially as the Olympics became closer and closer, to to really remove the influence of the head judge and really allow the judges to actually score. Obviously, we're using, some of the best judges in the world. We try to have global representation, especially in the Olympics. We can only have one judge per country. And so, if, the top, if you had your, judges 1 through 10 and the top 2 were, say, Australian judges, well, bad luck to the second judge. He didn't get picked because we could only have one per country. And then you would go down to your next one on the list. And that's, in a sense, how it was picked. The judges, but based on their analysis, their, years of things that they were being analyzed on from the judges and the computer system. But as far as like how our system works these days is the head judge used to have more of an opinion, but as technology got better and better, and me and Michelle were talking about the replay system, and how it's great that like at the Easterns, they have the replay system. The judges have access to that. It's amazing how accurate it's got the scoring to become without the head judge needing to put much input in. Interferences, you can go back and watch them again, and you can watch it over and over until you're 100% sure of your call. When I was, probably halfway through, I'd say 2005 or 6, when I was judging on the WCT tour, they started bringing in the replay system, and I was like, wow, this is going to make it so easy and so much more accurate. In the beginning, it was just some guy with this giant camera down on the end, and he was basically recording on a cable into a VCR, and you had somebody else with a book, and he was like monitoring and writing down every wave, and he'd be like, oh, I want to see red, and he'd be like rewinding it, and he'd pass it and be like, oh no, wait, it's coming. And it was just chaos, but it gave us a little bit of an insight to have a couple waves to give us that tool to be able to judge better. I always say that the replay system shouldn't be relied upon. Might go down, but it shouldn't be, if you're watching every single wave on the replay to score, then you're not relying on your own recall and your own analysis. You're having to watch it over and over again. And that really slows down, for one, the flow and the heat. The competitors are like, what was my last score? You're like, oh, I need to see 3 replays first. It doesn't really work. So you need to be focused on your scoring, getting it right. But within the ESA, like I was talking about, we used to have, 2 cameras. We run double areas. And then eventually the last couple of days, we bring it down to 1 area. Well, we used to have 2 cameras per area, and they would do their best to get the waves. But unfortunately, they wouldn't get everything. And then when we went to 1 area, it was probably like 2017, we're like, let's bring all 4 cameras into the judging area. And instead of 2 cameras, we'll now have 4. We have 4-person heats. Let's assign 1 camera to each color. So all that cameraman has to do is focus on all of red's waves. So guess what? 98% of the rides were now captured. So now what happens? The head judge, I started telling the head judges, guess what, boys? You're losing your job. You are no longer a head judge. Now you're just a manager of the resources. So what does manager of the resources mean? At this level, you have good judges that are all judging pretty accurate. The head judge one of the resources, he goes in the beginning and he sets everybody on the same line. Guys, the average is a 6.5 on this wave. I agree with that score. Good score. That's his opinion right there. Later on in the heat, the judges score. If it's all within a close window, 1.5 points, then the judges type it in and it's automatically gone, fed it in the computer, and that score is gone instantly. If the scores come in and there's a big spread on it, 3 points, 4 points, whatever, the score locks and it gives a little bit of a notification, and the head judge has a tablet and he'll be like, oh, we've got a problem on this score. When there's a break in the waves, he says, okay, let's show the last of yellow. And the judges get to watch it once, they get to watch it twice. And if you want to adjust your score, then you can. We don't tell people who has the good score and the bad score, so it's not a perfect system. Sometimes you might create a bigger spread, but 75% of the time, that spread starts getting smaller. And you have a 5-man panel, and usually I say the high and the low automatically go out. The 3 scores in the middle are almost always close. And so what are the resources? Like I said, it's that first wave that everybody is the same and the head judge could give his opinion on. And then it's really just the head judge showing the replay and managing those resources. And what are the other resources? Oh, the wave of red was a 6.5. Let's watch red 6.5 before you score the last of yellow. So he has, interesting ways to control those resources to get the judges to think. But at the end of the day, the judges are responsible for their own score. So if you're watching the Olympics, I wouldn't be surprised if you have a big spread. You're like, whoa, what's that judge going that score? And that judge, this is how the system works. But look at the 3 scores in the middle. Don't worry about the end scores. And once again, I've told it to the other judges or other coaches, I'm like, what do you want? Do you want the judges be able to judge and that's their score that they believe in and they get a second chance to watch it again or a third chance? Or do you want a head judge to get in there and tighten it all up so it's all super beautiful and you as a coach or the public can be able to swallow that score because everybody thought the same? The best judges in the world don't think the same. And I would say we created a system, a public that thinks we do. So this is, just how it works, how I've been, promoting that. But this is at the upper level. We're talking other smaller events where you need a head judge to have more input. But the judges themselves need to have that confidence, that experience, that knowledge of the system to be able to produce the right scores. But it's really nice to see how much it's evolving. I talked about me on the WCT. In my first years, it was like, press enter, see the score that I gave you. And it's like, that's not my score. Yeah, but I had to bring you in line with everybody else. It's like, I didn't like that wave, so now it's the judge's score is the judge's score. And, like I said, there's always a different opinion. And the more the public can understand that, the more it opens it up and makes it a lot easier for judges. But at the same time, we still are defining good surfing. So just a little bit of a, side path there just to kind of show you where the upper level's gone to. Let me grab a drink of water here before I jump into these key points to remember. So super important, letter A. Can't stress this one enough as well. Come prepared for the day. Bring the proper clothing, bring sunglasses, bring a hat, bring sunscreen, bring whatever you need to do to be comfortable for the duration of the day that you need to judge. Because guess what? If you're not comfortable, you're not concentrated. And a lot of times up in the judging tower, especially if it's a 2-story scaffolding, people are down on the beach. They're like, in bikinis and trunks and bathing suits, having a great time. And you're up in the judging tower and it is the coldest place on the beach because it's getting all that wind. You're in the shade. And if you're sitting there shaking and freezing cold, guess what? You're going to have poor concentration. So come prepared for the day, proper clothing, sunglasses, that glare that I know the East Coast gets in the early morning heats, that's brutal. Luckily, here on the West Coast, we deal with it at the end of the day. You guys got it at the start of the day. And so sunglasses, but proper sunglasses. I can't stress enough, polarized sunglasses cut through that glare. You might, not be able to see the color, but usually you'll be able to at least see a black silhouette doing maneuvers. And then as they surf out of the glare, or maybe you have a spotter up the beach or something, you can figure out the color. But the polarized lenses, they really help. Hat, sunscreen, like I said, whatever you need. Next one would be use your brakes properly as needed. Your brakes are your brakes. So that's when, you have a chance to use the restroom. That's when you have a chance to get a bite to eat. That's when you have a time to send that text message or make that phone call. Sometimes, you might not get a break. The head judge, normally there's only one head judge at a lot of events. Some of the upper level events, there's 2 head judges working. So they rotate amongst each other. But a lot of times that head judge doesn't get a break and he might be like, hey, the most experienced person on the panel, hey, can you watch this next heat for me? I really got to take a break. And so, you might have lost your break on that rotation. But normally I say use your breaks. That's when it's your time to rest your eyes. It's nice to, take your eyes off the water and rest a little bit. And then you should, check the judging roster if they're using one. And, you might say, well, what's a judging roster? A lot of times in those bigger events, let's see, I'm trying to pull up a judging roster right here. In those bigger events, especially, 5-person or 7-person, this 5-person panel, where they use 7 judges, or, even the 5-person panels, they have something you call like a judging roster. And it looks a little bit something like this. And shows the rotation system. So this would be, excuse me, one of the more complicated ones, because this is a 7-judge panel roster. And so it shows you what heat you're on, what heat you're off. So, when you come back, when you're on break, who to sit down and replace. And basically, if there's any confusion, you kind of look over to that. So basically it has, J1 through J7, that would be judge 1 through judge 7. And then the heats are labeled across the top. So for example, judge 1 is going to work the X's, and the zeros are the O's. Those are the breaks. So he's going to go judge 1 heat on, 1 heat on, 1 heat on, and have a break. And then he's going to do 2 heats and have a break, and then 3 heats and have a break. So that 7-judge panel roster, that's kind of how it works. Usually we always say, when you come back in, you replace the same person all day long. You can have this written down, and I don't care how many events I've done, the judges always mix up the roster by the end of the day. So when it gets mixed up, just deal with it. Try to find the spot back into it. But like I said, you always replace the same person all day long. And that's just the rotation. It's nice to keep it a little bit organized. Obviously, if you have a 3-person panel and one person's on break, you don't really need a roster. It's one person gets up, next person sits down, and it just goes down the line. No, there's no dumb questions out there. Somebody had a question in the chat, and it was whether judges get paid. It depends on the level that you're working at. I know some, there's volunteer judging, and there's judging all the way at the highest level, and everything in between. So, when you're first getting into it, sometimes you're just volunteering your time as a shadow judge or a spotter, and just trying to help out and get that experience. And as soon as you get more into the panel and more experience, or you were just hired onto a panel because you had done this course, you knew the knowledge or whatever. But judges normally get paid. The more experience you have, usually the higher you get paid, or it also depends on which level event it is. Some of the lower level events just pay low, and the higher level events pay higher. But is a career as a judge possible? Yes, it's possible, but really at the highest level. And even those highest level judges, a lot of them have backup jobs, but backup jobs that are flexible. So it's a little bit difficult. I wouldn't say you're going to make $1 million off the judging, not even close. But you are doing something that you love to do, and if you can get a lot of times, like I said, I work in the scholastic events around here, and a lot of the judges on there, they have weekday jobs and they have their weekends off, and guess what, they're out there working on their weekends, but they're working with surfing, so it's rewarding for them. So they kind of has 2 jobs, and the contest just ends up being a little bit extra. But like I said, everywhere from volunteer to the WCT judges, that's all they do for a living, but they travel around and they're experienced enough to where they're the best judges in the world, and that's why they're judging the best surfers in the world. So they need to be kind of freed up. Is there bias judging at the highest level? I personally don't really think so. In all my years of judging, I've never really seen any blatant bias judging. Maybe, somebody might steer towards an exchange comparison a little more here or there, something that's not so evident, but I've never really seen something that's biased to where I could, pull up some conspiracy theory, which is always so easy for the public to pull up. Like, oh yeah, that he got that score because he had the right sticker on his board, he was sponsored by that, or he must be paying off the judges or something like that. I've never in all of my different levels seen anything like that. And so I tell people, yeah, the judges are up there, they're doing their best. I'll say, the judges don't always get it right. Sometimes their scores right on, sometimes it's not right on, but once again, that's the difference of opinion. But even the judges don't get it right all of the time. But I always say they're doing their best job all of the time. They don't want to get it wrong. When you get a bad score or a wrong result, like I said, usually take that, home with you, and you're like, oh, I eliminated somebody with a bad score. But that's why you have a panel. But, for me, like I said, I've never really seen much bias, and, that makes me feel pretty proud that I know everybody's doing their best. So that would be our judging roster. Or if you're from Australia, you say a judging rooster, which kind of confuses some people because they start looking for the rooster in the tower. Let's see, next one on the list would be the return from your breaks with enough time to get back into rhythm. You don't want to return late from your breaks, because if you return late from your breaks, guess what? You missed the start of the heat. You might have missed that significant ride. You might have missed something really important in the heat. And so return with enough time, even so you can, see a couple waves that ridden. So, a lot of times within the ISA events, these days I have, the head judge has a tablet, a head judge's tablet. The judges have their tablet and they're writing it down on paper, typing it into a tablet. I have myself as the technical director. I have the technical director's tablet. And in my tablet is every single ride from that day, which logs into a tablet. And it's amazing because if I have to go down and explain a situation, I can actually watch it. And I don't show my tablet to anybody downstairs. But if the judges want to come back on their break and they're like, oh, wow, I missed the best wave of the day. Hey, can you show me that wave? Can I see it? And they'll get to watch it without having to interfere with the judge's replay monitor. So it's good to return from breaks, get back into rhythm, see what's going on, see if anything changed. Start the day by analyzing the conditions. It's, really good, like I said, if you can watch competitors out in the lineup and seeing the potential of what's possible out there, or seeing whether it's really windy, really closed out, really good. And so, back when I first started judging as well, our head judge used to say, oh, watch the rides before the heat, throw a bunch of scores. So it'd be like, oh, there's a 6, there's an 8, and then the horn would blow. And it'd be like, wow, I haven't seen anything in the first 5 heats that was as good to that 8-point ride. So we stopped doing that, because guess what? Competitors, when they're free surfing, they surf a lot better than they do in the heats, especially back then, going forward a bit more, holding back in a little bit heats. Now guys just go for it from the start of the first horn. But if you're too locked into the scores that were happening before, what you really want to do is analyze the conditions and what's possible without trapping yourself in scores. I mentioned the other day, and then I saw somebody had a Instagram post or something, and I got tagged in it, and I was like, that's not exactly what I said. So if you're still on there, there's a little, I don't know who posted that one, but somebody, I had said that it was crucial for judges to come a minimum of 30 minutes before the start of the first heat. And that 30 minutes allows you to analyze the conditions, find out what you're judging, get settled in, any last minute organization, grab a cup of coffee, and boom, you're in there ready to go. Something like that. So 30 minutes is usually the minimum. That gives you enough time. If you're a head judge, usually I say you should show up an hour before, so you can get everything organized for the judges to get there, and then maybe have a little bit of meeting, whatever you got to do. Now, the Instagram post that I saw come up the other day said athletes should get there 30 minutes before their heat. For athletes, I say you should get there 60 minutes before your heat. Of course, if it's the first heat of the day, it doesn't help to get there in the dark. You can't see anything. But usually I say an hour before if you're a competitor, because you want to go look at the conditions, have time to go for a 20 or 30-minute warm-up, and then you want to check in and watch the conditions again. So judges, get there 30 minutes before the start of the day. Competitors, you should be there 60 minutes before your first heat. That was the kind of difference there. And so let's see, input. Yeah, so I mentioned this little F, input for the judges meeting. Sometimes there'll be a judges meeting before the start of the event or the start of the day. And that's, you can talk about maybe something that happened the previous day, or, that's the general time for input, to sort anything out or organize, the interference is going to be like this today. That's, you don't always need a judges meeting, but they're usually quite functional when they have them. Direct attention at all times with focus on the heat and the water. I already talked about that one. Don't be looking around too much. Don't be on your cell phone. The next one's super important. Avoid being influenced by others, such as spectators, commentators, friendships, other judges. You need to have confidence in your own scoring, your own analysis, and don't get worried about, everybody on the beach that was cheering for, that chop hop aerial that made all the judges sick to their stomach because they wanted to see real proper aerials and proper maneuvers, but everybody on the beach clapped. Or, somebody got not barreled, but they got right in the pocket of the wave and the whole beach erupted and the commentator started going crazy. And you as a judge are like, did he really get barreled? Did the person disappear behind the lip of the wave? Because that's what defines a quality barrel, not just getting great positioning. Now, if it's entry level, people can barely surf, great positioning might be one of the best things going on. But if you're really comparing good barrels, you really need to, like I said the other day, analyze the quality of it. Don't be influenced by the spectators, the commentators, what your friends might say or whatever, or other judges as well. Sometimes other judges like can't control their body language, like, oh my gosh, or, sound effects come out, I've heard it all through my times. And so just try not to be influenced by what you hear going on around you. Focus on what you see and know yourself. During the heat, keep unfocused talking to a minimum and don't influence others with comments or opinions unless requested by the head judge. That one's super important. I talked a little bit about the other day about talking on the panel. Unfocused talking, I'm definitely against, because that's going to take away from concentration. Sometimes there's focused talking, a wave's already in and, there's a difference of opinion, or the head judge is like, I didn't see that one, guys. I was fixing a score over here. What do you do on that wave that got a 6.5? That I call focused talking. It's productive to the heat. It's not influencing other judges or the direction of the heat, but it is focused on the analysis and focus on strengthening those resources that the judges and the head judge have to perform. So just, really try to respect others. Don't influence the others with comments or opinions unless the head judge is, asking you to. Call the colors aloud when the competitors are paddling if there's no spotter for the judges. It's nice when there's a spotter. You can say red's paddling and red's up. That way you don't miss that initial point of takeoff in an interference. You don't miss, the first maneuver on a wave. Sometimes there's spotters, but sometimes the budget of the contest or just lack of volunteers, there is no spotter. So if there is no spotter, then the head judge of the judges, they need to take the reins and do the best for the panel. So sometimes, you're not the one calling it out. Maybe there is a spotter and he missed it. If you see something and nobody called it, say red's up, because you don't want to be the only one that saw it. If everybody else sees it, then the judging panel is judging properly. If you're the only one that saw it, then everybody's got to rely on your score. So do your best for the whole judging panel. Next one, super important, especially with, 4 and 6 person heats. Do wave counts constantly through the heat to check that you or other judges have not missed any waves or written them for the wrong color. It happens all the time, especially in 6 person heats. You might watch a wave of green and you wrote it in the white box, or you might watch a wave of red and put it in the blue box. It's really easy to mix up scores when there's so much going on in the heat and you don't even know it. But if the judges say, oh, the wave count is 4, 5, 7, 9, and the next judge down the line is all, yep, I got 4, 5, 7, 9. And the next judge down the line is like, oh, I only got 3, 6, 4, 8. And it's like, the majority has this number. You missed something or put it in the wrong box. And then you need to figure out if it was a wave that you missed. And the head judge or the experienced judge can help you get that score that you missed. Or maybe I have an extra wave from somebody else and that's where it went. And then it's just always that challenge of trying to figure out which one it was and where it goes. So if you're constantly doing wave counts through the heat, you don't let it get to the very end of the heat and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm all over the place. By the end of the heat, it's harder to find out where those missed waves are. If you're doing that wave count constantly, you're just constantly checking. When multiple rides are happening one after another at the same time, a judge must do his best to watch all the rides, but the judges should pay closer attention to the surfers in the more critical section of the waves. So for example, I always get this one, when two surfers go right and two go left, like this part of the panel watch the right, another part watch the left, and it's just not organized like that. You kind of, like I probably said the other day, you kind of focus out and you do your best to watch everybody surf. But once again, it's not a perfect system. Something sometimes get missed and sometimes it doesn't. If you think you missed something, then you shouldn't guess at it. But definitely helps to pay attention to the surfer that's in the more critical section of the wave. If somebody's doing a big opening turn, you don't necessarily need to be focused on the person that's just finishing their wave in the white water, or the person in the middle of the wave that's just pumping down the line. You kind of need to be, going back and forth, doing your best with it. But like I said, there's parts that need more focus than others. So that's pretty much what I said. More attention going to a competitor doing a big outside maneuver versus somebody just finishing the ride. Now, what happens if too many rides happen at one time? Well, you do your best for one, but it's also helpful to place a box or a mark in the score box to remember that the wave was surfed. Because, say there's 4 people up and riding at once. It's hard to and somebody else is paddling out the back too. It's hard to go in and fill all those scores out accurately. So sometimes what I do is I'll take the tip of my pen and I'll put a dot in that box and a dot in that box. And I can put a dot in the box really quick, a lot quicker than I can write down an accurate score. And then when the rides are finished, then I come back to those places where there's the dot and I put in my score. And if I'm not sure on that score, then I get an average from the head judge because I thought I missed something. When you put a dot in your box, usually when you go and fill that score, the writing is going to cover up that dot. So nobody even really sees that. So I've heard other people, they try to put a letter of the category, like a P for poor and an F for fair. But for me, if that works for you, great. And if not, sometimes writing the letter it's going to take longer than just putting the dot. But, whatever you can do to kind of help get through those things. But if you miss a wave or you can't remember it, never guess, because this is where problems occur. It's best to put a small M in the scoring box and ask for an average from the panel, or ask the head judge if you're not sure. It's, sometimes you think you saw it and you might have missed the best maneuver of the heat. So if you think, and then the head judge is like, oh my God, I've got a 3 to a 9 and I didn't see that wave because I was fixing this problem over here. And so I've got no, input to kind of sort you guys out. We've got no replay. Oh my gosh, what's going on? When maybe the person missed a wave and, sometimes, like I say, usually your first feeling is right. But if you feel like you missed something, there's no shame in putting an M. And maybe it's not that you missed it, we're all human there, and we're doing our best. And even the best judges, I've found it myself at times, you're distracted by, you're 100% doing your best, but we're humans. You're going to be distracted by something. There's, something going on in your personal life, or it's, the 10th hour of the day and your brain's tired and your brain's already in the car driving home, and you watch a ride with your eyeballs from the beginning to the end. And at the end of the ride, you're like, oh my God, I can't remember a thing that person did on that wave. It happens. We're human. So just own up to it and be like, oh yeah, I saw that wave, but I missed that wave. Can I get an average on it rather than guessing? And that happens at all levels. The next one, super important as well. Just from different sides of it. Don't discuss the heat scores, interferences, or the results, anything problematic, especially problematic, with anyone outside the technical team, like the judges or the directors, regardless of your friendship or your relationship. Refer them to the head judge or the contest director. What happens in the tower, basically stays amongst the judges. If there's a problem, then that's where the head judge is going to get called down. He's going to explain it, because What if you completely disagreed with the rest of the panel? You need to work as a team. It's, your own individual scores, but the scores go out as a judging panel, an average of the scores. So you're basically still working as a team. So the team needs to support itself. So if you were the only person that didn't call an interference and everybody else, and you went down in your break and you started saying to everybody or saying to your friend that was in the heat that came up to you, wow, God, I didn't agree with that call. Those guys ripped you off and, you shouldn't have gotten called on that. That creates, for one thing, a bad image on the contest, and a bad vibe that kind of goes from that competitor and maybe to other competitors. And, you want the contest to look as good as possible. You want the judging panel that you are a part of to look as best as possible. So the best thing to say is, sorry, I can't talk about that. Talk to the head judge. Have, go to the contest director, talk to the contest director. They'll send you to the head judge. They'll make that communication possible. But that's not the judge's area. It's the directors or the head judges. Getting down to the end here. Keep your judging sheet neat and clean. No drawing or doodling. I see some very interesting things sometimes on the judging sheets. Some, amazing drawings of perfect waves. Saw a comment one time, judges need more donuts. Keep that stuff off the judges sheets. There's no room there. Keep it neat and clean. Imagine you're a competitor in the water and you lost a really close heat and you come in and you look at that judges sheet and you're like, judges need more donuts. Well, maybe I should have brought them donuts to have them, focused on my last score, because they definitely weren't watching my last wave. That kind of, thing on the judges sheets just opens the door for complaints. It opens the door to make the judges look non-professional. If you have to change any scores, either initial those scores or rewrite that judges sheet at the end of the heat. It's nice when they look clean, but if you're in a 6-person heat and everybody caught 10 waves, you're talking about rewriting 60 waves, which if you do that at the end of the heat, probably going to miss some of the next heat. So sometimes just scratching out a score and rewriting it with an initial, that can be just as good. So keep your sheets, clean. Don't get lost on having a bad score by using that wave as a future comparison. Say you dropped a 3-point ride and everybody else went 7. If you keep coming back to that 3-point ride to compare to, you're going to be off for the rest of the heat because everybody else is thinking it's a good ride and you're just thinking it's a fair ride. So don't get lost on that score. It's going to throw you off if you do. Sometimes, it's like, oh God, how can you guys go better on this one, that one? But that, like I said, will throw you off. So focus. If that happens to you, don't focus on that bad score or their bad score or your bad score or whatever it has. Don't focus on that one. Focus on a wave where you are aligned with the judging panel so you can get back into the scale so you guys can all get back on the same category, the same page. So focus on the waves that you're aligned with. And then, kind of gets to the end of the day. If you have that bad score, don't take it to heart. Like everybody has a different opinion. Like I say, try to figure out why you had a difference of opinion. The best place for that is on your break, or if you can't resolve it on your break, then ask the head judge, like, can we have a judges meeting at the end of the day? I just really want to find out why everybody, went this way on that one. The end of the judges meeting, sometimes it's, you've judged a 12-hour day and you want to get the heck off the beach, and the head judge does too. And sometimes the head judge just say, we'll talk about it in the morning. Good job, boys. I'll see you tomorrow. That's fine. But other times, a judges meeting in the end is nice. It'll tighten up the day. But, sometimes it's functional. Other times it's not. Just depends on what's going on. So to kind of wrap it up, most importantly, the judges must work together as a team. Making it fun, having a positive attitude will be much better for yourself, the judging panel that you're working with, and the event in general. So, we're judging surfing. It's not like going surfing on our own, I can guarantee you, but it is a job. But the more you can make it fun, take passion in it, do it the best you can possibly do it with a positive attitude, that's going to make it better for the whole system. Everyone will have their own opinion, and you will need to respect the opinion of others, but the judges work together to reflect and define surfing and get hopefully clear results. Make consistent comparisons to the best of your ability, but be flexible and open-minded to work well with the other judges and the head judge. The last one that's on here, listen to your head judge, but it's also absolutely necessary to believe and have confidence in yourself to make the right comparisons. You know, like I said, experience comes with years of doing it. And in the beginning, you know, you should be open more to input, especially from the most experienced judges, especially from the head judge, because they have so much resources and experience to share. And hopefully they can share it in a productive way that you can learn from your mistakes and get better. But at the same time, you need to believe in yourself that you can do the job properly to rely on your own scores and get that out there and not be over influenced, you know, when you're ready for that point. So, you know, I know within the ESA, it's great because you're running so many different events from, you know, the district events to the regional events, all the way down to the championship event. And you have judges from just the beginning level, which, you know, some of them on here are like that, and all the way up to the upper level. You know, some of, you know, the WSL judges come in and judge at the Easterns, and there's so much experience in between. And the more you can soak up, you know, that positivity and those experiences and learn from it, the better you're going to move through the system. So that's pretty much my judging tip wrap up. You know, I'll go ahead and, you know, do a quick review from the beginning, but if anybody's got any questions on, you know, the judging tips, we can kind of sort it out here before I do a review on the other material that most of you kind of already heard the other days. So, or if Michelle wants to come back in and have a few words as well. I know we're going to get, you know, Michelle's got all this new information. She said she might jump in the judging panel too. So never know.
That's right. You guys better look out. Chip, Barry, Brandon, I'm coming for you this weekend. Let's see. Did you see this question about the opinion changed, removed, added judging criteria?
No, I mean, I can go back and already start, you know, from the top with judging criteria, and that's a great lead in. Thanks, Mark. As far as the judging criteria, I don't think there's, you know, anything that should be changed, removed, or added. The only thing with shortboarding criteria, you know, it's what are our key elements? Our key elements are commitment and degree of difficulty. Degree of difficulty would be, you know, how you analyze the different quality of maneuvers. The commitment would be, you know, how much you're surfing in the critical section. The only thing that I would like that would be added to the judging criteria would be critical section, you know, but it's analyzed through the word commitment. It's just not clear like it is in the longboard. Critical section is actually there. So in my opinion, if it was, you know, up to me to write the judging criteria, I thought I would add critical section. I would say, you know, commitment, critical section, and degree of difficulty, something like that. But, you know, like I said, it's still analyzed in there the same way. It's just whether the word's there or not. You know, moving through the judging criteria, next one would be innovative and progressive maneuvers. That's just rewarding for, you know, the futuristic maneuvers that's going. A lot of times with, you know, aerials, you know, you're looking at different grabs and different rotations. And if it's an entry level event, somebody does any type of an aerial, well, that's probably more difficult than, you know, the cutback or something like that. But as you take it into a higher level, you need to look at the different degrees of difficulty in the different kinds of aerials. And I said the other night, really focusing on the height above the lip, the critical section that it's being done on, and whether it's being done with control or not. The next part of the judging criteria would be commitment, combination of major maneuvers. And as I talked about, that's just connecting the good turns together. You know, good, as we talked today, good maneuvers should get a good score. So it goes in that good category. What gets complicated with the combinations is when you have somebody do a good maneuver and a not so good maneuver, a fair maneuver, and they finish with an average maneuver, and you're like, well, I really like something about that way, but I don't really like something else about it. So where's that balance out to everything else going on? So that would be the combination. The other one would be the variety of maneuvers, just trying to mix it up. It's nice when the judges, or sorry, when the competitors are surfing and they keep it, spontaneous. The judges don't know what they're going to do, and they do all different varieties of maneuvers. I said the other night, though, if it's all good maneuvers and they're repetitive, it's still going to get a good score. But if it's all good maneuvers and it's got variety, that's going to get a better score. Speed, power, flow, like I said the other night, speed, usually the faster you go, the better. But speed is really needs to be adapted to the wave that you're riding. So that adaptation of your speed. Power, obviously, how much you're using the rail of your board. The bigger, heavier weight surfers have more power, but if you have perfect technique and really good leverage in your turns, you can get a lot of power out of those. And flow, like I said, it's just the natural beauty of surfing. Some people have it, some people don't, and it's seamless surfing. One maneuver connects right into the next. And like I said the other day, for me, it's the art of surfing. The longboarding criteria, just briefly, without taking up too much time, it really focuses on a lot of the same points that the shortboarding does, but it focuses from a longboarding perspective. And these days, it's not about modern surfing. The judging criteria doesn't value somebody who's riding a longboard like a shortboard. It's traditional longboard surfing. So it's all about the different kinds of nose riding, the hang fives, the hang tens. You could go progressive with the hang heels, or, 1 foot up in the air while the other one's hanging five. Different variations on that, but it's really all about the traditional longboard surfing. And then there's a lot of the other factors, using the full length of the board, which means the cross stepping. You have critical section. With critical section, though, in the longboarding, it's really important to make sure and analyze maneuvers that are being done in the critical section, because you're riding a 9 or a 10-foot board, and you can do great maneuvers in the flattest parts of the waves, and those can get a decent score. But if you're doing good maneuvers in the critical section of the wave, that's going to get a much better score. And then we talked, a little bit about SUP, a little bit about bodyboarding, and a little bit about adaptive as well, how those different criteria went. And then on night 2, class 2, we jumped into the interferences section, and we talked about how, dynamic and, interpretational those interferences are. And it really comes down to the judge being able to look at a wave, look at a situation, and analyze whether there was hindrance of scoring potential. That's the most important thing. Hindrance of scoring potential. Yes, there is hindrance, so somebody's going to get an interference. Or no, there was no hindrance. You can have rail bumping contact, but if there's no hindrance and it's a non-priority heat, then there's no interference going down, no hindrance. And if you're thinking maybe, well, maybe is going to lead you to a no call, and that's kind of where that's at. I presented like a checklist, which talked about the more dynamics, because you have point breaks as a kind of venue. You have multi-peaks, which is 2 peaks coming together. And if you have 2 peaks coming together, right of way goes to the person who's riding the wave first. Doesn't matter which wave is better. Now, if we have the 1 peak situation, which can happen on a reef or a beach break, and you basically have 2 people paddling for the same waves, there's almost like you can go through all the rules, which are in the manual you guys will get. And there's a lot of words and there's a lot of rules, and it's really good to understand it all. But if you want to pick through it and splice through it, the checklist that I present at the end of that focuses on the first thing giving right of way would be inside position. Who's closest to the center of the peak? And there's some waves that don't have a center of the peak. In that circumstance, the judges would say, they're both in the center of the peak, then which direction was better, the right or the left? And based on whether it's a better right or a left at the initial point of takeoff, then the judges need to decide who had inside position for that direction. If a wave doesn't have inside position, it doesn't have superior direction, then you go to chosen direction. Whoever, somebody's dropping in straight and somebody's definitely going right. That's chosen direction. And if they both do the exact same thing and they crash into each other, well, you can call it double interference. But double interference it's the last thing you want to call. You want to go through those other factors first. And that's, pretty much interferences. But like I said, there's always a different interpretation. The easy ones, super, easy. Oh, somebody dropped in on somebody else, there's hindrance, somebody gets an interference call. But I showed a few examples the other night. There's multiple interpretations, and I shared some of my own, personal experiences in some of, things that I've seen go down. And each judge can have a completely different call. And based on the background that they're using to make that call, their analysis of the rules, that different call has complete basis. So that was pretty much interferences, in a nutshell. And then we talked about priority last night, and we talked about how that system works and how the priority system is still in constant evolution. There's changes to the rules every single year. So at the start of a year, you need to go back to those rules and see if there's anything changed. 2019, we had some major changes based on some instances that happened at Pipeline in the very final event of the season. And that pretty much changed everything at the upper level, and that'll slowly trickle on down. But a lot of organizations are just working off the basic fundamental priority system. And that is, at the start of the heat, nobody has priority, non-priority rules apply, normal interference rules. And if somebody catches a wave and they reach that primary takeoff zone, then they get last priority. Next person to catch reaches the takeoff zone, they get last priority, the other person moves up. People with no priority that haven't caught a wave, they can paddle for as much as they want, because there's multiple people with no priority. Can't have something can't lose something you don't have. But those surfers that have third and fourth priority, if they paddle and miss, they can lose their priority. Now, as soon as that next to last person catches a ride, then the priority established is set. That one person left in the lineup that now has first priority, they haven't caught a wave yet, but they have first priority. So if they paddle and miss, they lose their priority. They go back to the end of the line. Guess what? They haven't caught a wave yet. So very, interesting position to be in. Nice to have first priority, but you don't want to miss the wave because you'll end up going to the back of the line. I talked about strategy and stuff, how to use, your priority to properly surf heats, because it's a great tool to create opportunity for surfers to get on the best waves and equal opportunity to surf, but can also be used in a defensive way as well to, focus on getting on the best waves, but also keep other surfers off the best waves because you have a higher priority. So there's a lot of, dynamics and details that go into that priority system, and how it can be used. And like I said, it's constantly in evolution. And so I encourage you to, always check it out. If you're first time into it, ask, it's a little bit difficult to understand when you read it or just have me talking about it. But if you watch it go down and you see it happen, once you see enough of it, you're like, wow, that's actually pretty easy. But one of the main things is, and I stressed it yesterday, always look at the priority board. There's a priority board on next to the judges, and it's like the law for the, who has right of way for the next wave. And so just because you don't agree with what the board says, you have to go by what the board says, because that's what's going to dictate the next call when the next wave comes through. And the last thing I'll kind of say on that is, that primary takeoff zone, what's it take to get priority? In beach breaks, you usually say it's primary takeoff zone. So you almost have like an imaginary line that goes through the inside. And once the surfers paddle out and they pass this imaginary line that the priority judge has established in his mind for the venue, once they pass that line, they're entering the primary takeoff zone. So even though surfers might be nowhere near each other, once they reach that primary takeoff zone, they're in position to catch waves. And so that's where it's at. That primary takeoff zone, whether you're on a reef break or a point break, definitely going to change as compared to a beach break, but super important. And how much can you paddle before you lose? That's the interpretation a little bit of the priority judge. But normally it's, when you're in, paddle enough to commit to catching that wave. But also, as I imagined, sometimes you might lose your priority just because you position yourself. As surfers, we know if you position yourself in the right part of a wave, you don't even need to paddle sometimes. You can just wait till the wave is really steep, position yourself, and just basically stand up without ever having to paddle. Or if you position yourself that keeps another competitor off, those are areas where you're going to lose your priority and you never really paddled. So, but normally when it's the paddling and a miss, it's got to be with enough, strokes and intention to show that, you really wanted to catch that wave. And then, the rest of the course was pretty much today where I talked about all the different judging tips and, what you can do to improve yourself from the lower level all the way up to the lower level, the upper level, and, taking advantage of those experienced judges and learning as you go along and, really enjoying the ride. So that's, pretty much the long course in a short sum up. But, let's see, there's a couple of comments that came in. See if there's anything I missed. Yeah, there's a question I see coming in. Has there been thought about reducing the number of waves that a competitor can ride? Each organization is going to set what they think their wave maximum is. It's I see different sides of it. Unfortunately, in those entry level events, the competitors aren't always focusing on catching the best waves, and they're just wave after wave after wave after wave, and it's like, just, you already have a couple waves like that. Sit down and wait for a better one. Because I always say, if you catch, one ride and you catch another ride that's the same, and you catch the third ride that's the same, if they're all 4-point rides, I always say, like, how many 4-point rides do you need in your heat? Maybe 2 at the most. And then you start looking for a 5 or a 6. Otherwise, you're just wasting, I always say, you're wasting your time, you're wasting your energy, you're wasting your own positioning, and then you're probably giving up positioning to somebody in the heat. So it's better to get selective as you go through the heat. Now, whether reducing the wave maximum down, that's a different, in the ESA, we used to have a 15 wave max. But then I saw, in a beach break event on the WSL, I was like, whoa, Chloe and Dino just got 15 waves. WSL is using like an unlimited wave count. Maybe we should raise ours up. And then with the Olympics, we couldn't make it unlimited because you need a number on things like the Olympics, those, infinity, unlimited, those, it just doesn't work in Olympic terms. So I asked the computer operator, how many waves can the computer system hold? He said 25. I was like, okay, 25 waves it is. Nobody will ever catch 25. And then in the World Surfing Game finals, Gabriel Medina caught 23 waves in a 35-minute heat. I've never seen anybody catch that many waves. There are a bunch of 1s and 2s, and then he had, some 7s and 8s sprinkled in the middle. But normally and then the exact opposite end of it, the WSA is, they still allow for a maximum of 10, but in their events over the last 2 years, they've set the wave count at a maximum of 6 waves. And the idea behind that was to make competitors more selective. They knew that they were limited on waves, so they wanted to almost like train them in these contests to start catching better waves. And in some conditions, it really works well, and I like it. And in other conditions, which tends to be the wind swell sloppy conditions, I don't like it at all. So, the question was, has there been any thought on reducing the number of waves? Yeah. Yes, there has been. Some people adapt to it, some people don't. It really depends on the organization. For me, it really depends on the conditions. Let's see. Yeah, that was the only question. So I will go ahead and, wrap it up. I'm super happy to reach out, getting to the next level through the ESA. I'm really happy Michelle came in and saw the value in it and wanted to bring in as many potential judges, competitors, coaches, parents as possible to, share the knowledge, share the experiences and stuff that come through this course. It's, very beneficial. Like I said, the first getting to the next level I ever presented was in 2014 at the Easterns, where I came and I was coaching an athlete in the event. And I think I presented getting to the next level to a room full of people that were very interested, and that encouraged me to go on and keep producing the course. And then I also had a great opportunity to run some of my coaching sessions through some of the competitors on the side, as well as working with the ESA All-Stars in some of those. So it was a great experience, and really like the ESA and the events that take it from the district levels, like I said, all the way up to the Eastern National Championships. And I really want to thank ESA and Michelle for bringing me in to share the knowledge. And if anybody's got any questions like along the way, you can always find me somewhere. International Surf Services, my website, or Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. And like I was talking with Michelle, I'm happy to answer questions moving forward and stuff. And really just want to share the knowledge. Like I said, I work for the ISA, but at the same time, I don't just fly one flag. Like, I try to help out all the organizations, whether it's ESA, NSSA, WSA, whoever is interested to have the knowledge to produce better events, and competitors to perform better. Like I said, and I said it earlier, that the level of surfing is reaching the highest level, and the age of the surfers keeps dropping younger and younger. And it's simply because they have all the resources, like the resources being provided tonight, like the internet, that you can see everything around the world in a couple of minutes. And the coaches are becoming more educated, the parents are becoming educated, everything is pushing to the next level at the same time. So thanks again for everybody. I'm super stoked to present the course, and thanks, Michelle.
Well, we thank you. Lots of useful information, and we are going to be using you as a resource for many years to come. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your effort. Thank you for your enthusiasm. And we will definitely share that manual that you talked about. So if you want to just email that to me when you get a chance, and then I'll send it out to everybody who had registered for this course. And we will definitely keep you posted as to how everything goes, and maybe send a couple questions to you here and there if you don't mind. So we appreciate you. Thank you so much, Erik.
No problem. My pleasure. And yeah, I'll get that manual together. It's pretty much all together. Just need to tighten a couple things. So I'll get that over to you tonight or tomorrow sometime.
Okay, that would be great. And again, for anybody on here who has signed up for all 4 courses, if you want to step up for your local regional event, the Southeast Regionals this weekend, and then of course followed by the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast, we would love to have you guys come up and shadow judge for a few heats and also just observe. So just let me know if you're interested, send an email to me, and we'll just go from there, and we'll welcome you guys up on the scaffolding. And thanks again, Erik. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Right on. Thanks, Michelle. I appreciate it.
And
thanks for everybody for attending. Bye-bye.
See you later.